That is terrible. The worst. Oh my goodness. Well, we're friends now, folks. And now, all that time it was broadcasting. Oh my goodness. That is just reprehensible. I'm so sorry. I hope nobody. Oh, anyway. My name is Mud. My name is Dan Nelson. And this is Daily Art Adventure number 939. Oh boy. Second half of mixed media illustration. Reset. Ouch. Oh boy. Oh, let that be a lesson to me. Wow. All right. Whew, let's get you off me right away. Let's talk about artwork, eh? Just got up here from a nice, delicious dinner, and then discovered I still had some dinner in my tea. Here's a previous sketch. I modified this slightly, but I'm not going to tell you necessarily everything that I've done to this because that would just be redundant. Let's just get on with it, shall we? So I have here to my right a little jar of water. I have an assortment of bristle paintbrushes, and I have to my left a box of Kleenex. And the task in front of me right now is to start removing the watercolor, the brown watercolor paint that I smeared all over this illustration. It should be clear. You could. I need to come up with a name. There probably is a name somewhere, but I don't know what it is. I'm going to call it forced abstraction. Might be one label for a process like this. The idea being that I do not have total control using this technique. It deprives me of control, because there are things that are going to happen in this process. Forgive me, bad redundancy coming up here. Things are going to happen that I can't control. Sorry. If I just thought about the end of that sentence at the beginning, I wouldn't have started that sentence that way. Because I don't know exactly what's going to happen when I lift off the watercolor. There are a number of techniques in art that are kind of like this. Batik comes to mind. A number of others. I wasn't thinking ahead of coming up with examples. I'm sure I could think of some, but there are a number of art techniques that are intentionally, or what's the word, irreversibly stochastic, chance oriented. You just don't know exactly what's going to happen. Therefore, well, I guess in a sense, all printmaking is a little bit like that. You know, intaglio, that is, copper plate. You all have some of that element. I would say to some degree that you don't know exactly what's going to happen. That's part of the fun and the charm of those mediums. And the idea is, in a sense, is don't fight it. Go with it. Let me take a second to show you a finished illustration. Of course, this is outdoors, so it's much brighter, but I was going to say that's what this is going to look like. Well, except that it's a different subject matter, so you know what I mean. Anyway, I think boy, for these faces, really small faces. So I'm using here a small, long filbert bristle brush, long white beard. So for those of you who missed the earlier episode today, up until this point on this illustration, I'm following, hello David. Definitely a negative mask. Good, that's a good word for it. That's a good word for it. Up until this point, I am following the technique of my old friend Chris Payne, P-A-Y-N-E. This is his technique. I don't know where he got it. I am indeed quite curious about that. I would like to ask him that. When I say he's a friend, I mean a little bit, what's the word, familiar. We did actually meet 33 or so years ago in Dallas at the Dallas Society of Illustrators. But he would not remember me. But we did meet. I met him as Chris, and then he moved away while I was a member of the Dallas Society of Illustrators. He moved away and got uber famous. He was pretty popular among the gang there in Dallas at the time, but he moved away and became really famous and changed his name from Chris to CF, if you follow my drift. Anyway, you can Google him. Up until now, on this painting, I'm going to diverge from him in a little while, but up until this point, I'm following him. So since I said that, then I'll tell you, so what is the technique? All right, it is first do a simple outline drawing with a black, sometimes I use dark brown, with a black colored pencil, Prismacolor. And after the simple outline drawing is done, then you cover the whole drawing with acrylic paint mixed with gesso. And you try to do it thin enough that you can still see the drawing through the acrylic gesso combination. Does that make sense? The purpose of the gesso is to give the acrylic paint some tooth, some grit, which is quite important when it comes to putting the next layer, which is with a brush like this. I just did brown, what you're looking at right now. And then the next step, which I'm doing right now, is to reverse paint, negative paint. That is paint by taking paint off. And because it's watercolor, of course, it lifts off quite, and it's watercolor on top of acrylic, you know, scratchy. I won't take time to tell you then the rest of Chris Payne's technique, because I have a playlist on my channel with about, if I remember, about a dozen videos where I explore Chris Payne's technique at considerable length. So I will not bore you by repeating it all. I'm leaving Chris's technique. And so what comes after I'm finished lifting off as much brown watercolor as I want, then I'm going to abandon you guys for a few minutes, run downstairs to the garage, and spray the illustration with a very rough workable fixative. A product called Lacquer Matte, and I believe it's been out of production for many years. I only have 2 cans left, and I'm not even sure that either of them work. I think they do. Last time I did this a couple months ago, several months ago, it worked. Anyway, if that doesn't work, then I'll just spray it with a regular, normal, workable fixative. But I hope the lacquer mat works, because it's a very, very abrasive, very scratchy, workable fixative. And after spraying it then with a workable fixative, I will finish the illustration with pastel pencils. Right? You're seeing some of the charm here. You notice I'm essentially avoiding boundaries. Like there's a boundary here between, there's a sign on the wall and the wall, and so I didn't go like this across that boundary. I lifted off here and left. Again, that's part of the charm, I think, of the technique. Part of the reason I chose this, or invented, I guess, chose and invented this technique for this book. This is about the 10th, 11th, 12th illustration I've done for the book. And I chose it because it's a historical. This is the star of the hero of that man, Major James Coker of South Carolina. So because it's a historical, because it's a memoir, sort of not of the man, so it's not technically, but it's a tried to come up with a technique, first of all, that would have a lot of brown in it, which, as you see, I'm certainly accomplishing that, because brown gives people the feeling of old age, because of photographs. It's no great mystery. So an illustration that's done in earthy tones will feel like an old memory, which is, of course, exactly how I want this to feel. It really is fun. It's any technique that you use that has really quite in control of what it's going to look like is very fun for the artist. Fun for me right now, because I don't know exactly what any bit is going to look like, because there's a lot of chance happening here. And if you want to see F. Payne on Hit Image, and you'll be overwhelmed with these amazing, visually spectacular caricatures. Mostly, most of his work is caricatures of famous people. Hello, Ade. Oh my, good question. Ade is asking, and forgive me if I'm not pronouncing your name correctly. Ade is asking, what contemporary portrait painters? I would start out by saying, first of all, the usual suspects. People in America, the big dogs, Everett, Daniel, Green, Nelson Shanks. I mean, these are all just, like I said, good-naturedly call them big dogs. Another favorite of mine, just in general, including his portraits, is Frank. The guy. I have his book downstairs. I talk about him all the time. And I'm drawing a blank. I talk about him all the time. Honestly, somebody can tell me who I'm talking about. I don't think it's Francis at all. I'll tell you in a minute when it comes back. I will tell you, Asian. Oh, okay. Well, it's funny you should say that. There are so many outrageously good Asian painters and Asian portrait painters. I mean, it's just not even funny. Same thing with Russian. I mean, you know, even if which I'm not even close, but even if I were, you know, counted myself among one of the, you know, top drawer portrait painters in America, I still don't think I'd be in a top drawer painter in the world, because there's so many Chinese artists in particular, Chinese and Russians, that are just outrageously good. Here's one though. Here's another name that I've mentioned this guy several times. Because one of my viewers introduced me to him, oh, maybe 8 or 10 months ago now. And he's British, I think Scottish, but I'm not sure about that. His name is Christian Hook. Christian Hook. And he won the British portrait competition of some kind a couple years ago. And really took the portrait world by storm. Certainly in Britain, and maybe in the rest of the world too. I don't know, but I got to tell you, I was particularly smitten by the work of Christian Hook, and he does, of course, way better than I do. But now, ignore what I'm doing at the moment as an illustration. I call my normal painting, as you may know, I call it abstract realism. And the abstract is more important than the realism, even though the realism is unapologetically there. But the abstractions in my paintings are preeminent, more important than the realism. And Christian Hook is light years beyond me in that regard, but in a sense, in the same trajectory. I'll be bold enough to say I'm in the same quest as he is, I think. So because I pay my dues doesn't mean I'm any good or anything. I did manage to get into their national show about 3 or 4 years ago. The very first time I entered, I got into Oil Painters of America, OPA, Oil Painters of America, and you can Google them, and you can see, you know, this year's winners, and there are a lot of people in that group that do portraits and figurative work and all of it. If they're in the national show, they are outrageously good. So I don't have any names for you there, but just, you do ask a good question, Ade, because one of the things I do say all the time, so forgive me if you've heard it a whole bunch, but in your quest to be the best artist you can be, not only should you make it a point to look at good art, this is going to be kind of funny and a little bit offensive, forgive me, you should also make a point to avoid looking at mediocre art. If you can help it. Now, it sounds strange, but there's some method to my madness, and here it is. There is a tendency, probably among all human beings, especially when we're early in some grand project, there's a tendency to compare ourselves to other beginners. And I think in the art world, for instance, art majors in college often tend to compare their work with each other. They compare themselves to other college students, and I think that's a mistake, or at least you should. Don't compare yourself to other beginners. there are a number of websites on the internet that I like it feature the artwork of mostly young people. I'm thinking of DeviantArt and maybe Tumblr. I'm not sure. I don't keep up with it at all. I know DeviantArt. It's been around for a while. And I think that very often many of the young people who are aspiring artists, they compare themselves to other people on DeviantArt, which is fine if the other person is good, really good, really, really, really good. Do that. But besides the really good artists, say on Tumblr or DeviantArt, there's a number of people that are like you, so to speak. If you're a beginner, there's a number of people that are pretty much beginners, and you should more or less ignore those. Don't look at those. Let me give you a more positive and uplifting example from my own experience. It's 96, 97, 98. So a while ago, 22, 3, 4 years ago. I had the opportunity to do, and as I talked about this earlier in my earlier broadcast, so sure enough, 20 some years ago, I had the opportunity to do a particular kind of airbrush illustration, and the best way to describe it, it's like an X-ray view of in this case, and a beverage trailer. Later on, I had the opportunity to do an X-ray view of a boat. So do you know what I mean by cutaway view would be another word, but it was literally an illustration, airbrush illustration, all done by hand, where it looked like you were seeing through the skin, the outside, and so on. It was part of a marketing campaign for an ad agency, right? Now, back in the olden days, I don't know if they still do this or not. They probably do, but I haven't looked at one. Back in the a bunch of the best illustrators in the country, every year. I forget even now what it was called. Illustration. It's probably called Illustration number 2 in 1966. So it was number 39 or 40 by the time I became an illustrator. And I used to love to look at those things because the illustrators in there were just fine arts, just a different shtick, different thing. Anyway, so I got this job to do a cutaway Coca-Cola, big red Coca-Cola truck, okay, and a trailer. So 2 illustrations. Okay, so the very first thing, I'll call it that, a showcase book. And in that book, and it was big, thick book, 1.5 inches, sometimes 2 inches thick, big, huge, heavy book. And I flipped through it, and no, that's not true. Wait, I got internet in 1993, so never mind. But it was days before I used it in this way. Now you would just go on Google. But anyway, I flipped through the book, and there were a number of artists in that book who did cutaway airbrush illustrations. And here's the point I want to make. And again, not to pat myself in the back, but just say, this is what I recommend you do. I flipped and looked at all of them, and I picked out the one that I thought was the best. I forget now, I think his name was Mike. I do know that he lived in Phoenix, Arizona. And somehow, again, not using internet at the time, I called him up. I found a phone number. Called to do a cutaway. It's the first time I've ever done one. Can you tell me how you do your work? And he was extremely friendly, extremely helpful. Anyway, so in a way, that's what I recommend that you do, in a sense, as a student artist. Don't imitate anybody but the best person you can find. When I was changing gear somewhat, but I did a similar illustrator / graphic designer. When I first went into the business, I could not make a full-time living as an illustrator, so I had to supplement my illustration with graphic design. No big deal. A lot of people do that. Besides, it teaches you a lot. And This is in Fort Worth in the 1980s. And one day I walked into a bookstore, and I didn't even know what the name of this guy was, but my eyes fell on a book by Maxfield Parrish. And I went, Yazabala. I recognized his work. I didn't know his name. And I said, bingo. That's what I want to do. Now, let me qualify that. I took much of his technique and applied it to my own language, which was pen and ink and airbrush, pen and ink and watercolor. But for years then, Maxfield Parrish became my muse. Same idea. Don't copy mediocre artists. Copy good ones. All right. I've basically done I think what I need to do. Let me take just a second look at this for a minute and see if I want to go downstairs. See if I want to. Yeah, I think that's good. All right, so here's what I'm going to do. There's only 5 of you watching right now anyway, so forgive me. I'm going to pause you. And I'll go downstairs and spray this. All right, I'm back. Let's hope that the quality's better, although I have no scientific reason for thinking that'll be the case. Anyway, here we go. So it is now painted. No, sprayed, not painted. And my good old can of lacquer mat worked just fine, I'm happy to report. So here's my jar of pastel pencils. I'll put those over to my left. Now, I haven't said this so far, but when I say I'm going to use pastel pencils, let's get a little bit more technical, specific now. I'm actually going to redraw the illustration using the black colored pencil. I might switch to brown colored pencil. We'll see how I like the look of this. And rather than do the whole illustration with this I am not liking that pencil. So hang on a second. Here's my collection of just plain old colored pencils, Prismacolor color pencils. Oh, you guys, is this at the beginning of that video where I was flossing my teeth? That is so embarrassing. I am going to edit that as soon as I can, as soon as it's up on my channel and I have access to a computer. You may be sure I'm going to whack the beginning off that video. How embarrassing. All right. Oh, much better. How can you show a man with a big, long, full beard? How can you show that he's smiling? Smile lines Raised cheeks. There you go. Okay, I'm going to do just, by the way, I'm wearing my classy 2 pairs of glasses at the same time. It's a fashion statement. If you're not aware that's a cool thing now. Just glad none of my kids can see me. I would never live through the ridicule. Dad, Dad. All of you who have or have had, as we have had, teenagers know what I'm talking about. Okay, so I'm just going to do a little bit, and then let's proceed rather quickly into some of the pastel. I'm not real happy with the shape of his trousers here. They don't. I'm not entirely convinced that there's a real human leg inside there. So let's work on it till we get. There we go. All right, so let me just pull this here, and we have white, off-white, tan, beige. Well, that's white too. You know what? I need to dump these out. It looked like a good idea at the time. No, I'm kidding. I've used these in this jar like this a bunch, but at the moment I don't feel like. Look at that, somebody from California is calling me. I'm assuming it's none of you guys. I have a feeling I'm going to be doing a lot of sharpening, so let me get my little bitty pencil shaving wastebasket. All right, phew, sorry about all that waiting. Now, I am being pretty careful about, unlike when I was doing the acrylic, I didn't care about modeling, shading, texture. Now I do care about, of course, about the feeling that I'm leaving on the paper. Sharpen 2 pastels. One is orange-ish. All right, recenter. Yep. And I think he has white eyebrows. No, he has dark eyebrows. How about that? All right, we'll leave him dark then. What do you think? Is that looking like a man in 1900? music has quit. And it's playing strange sounds. Let's fix that. All right, back to the 2 pairs of glasses. I'm glad you guys can't see me very well. Okay, now let's get practical here for a minute. Once you've seen me do a few minutes of this, you don't really need to watch the whole thing. Let's just give you enough to give the idea, and that'll be good enough. I talked the other day when I did the rough sketch for this. I actually have 2 broadcasts, I believe, where I did first the rough sketch, and then a couple days ago where I did the what I call a finished rough sketch. And in both episodes I talked quite a bit about the artist's job includes, you know, telling the story, making up, inventing the story. I mean, it's not just enough to draw the picture. You have to, the artist has to figure out, you know, who's doing what, when, how, what, and so on. And this, that story has actually gone through several versions in the course of doing this illustration. At one point I made the mistake of having this man's face kind of pointed not straight at us but out this way, and thought, oh wait, that doesn't make sense. At another point I had this black man with a big smile, but this man has a big smile, and it was too many big smiles, so I had to fix that as well. So when I say make up the story, in this case I'm really talking about the psychological, the interaction between these 4 men. Right, that's all, in my opinion, that's part of my job. I better give it, I'm saying to myself, I better give that some thought. I better give it some thought. You know, what is each man thinking? What is going on? What is their relationship like? And can you see what? I'm quite happy with that guy's face right there. Let's leave that for a minute, and let's do some of the clothing. But I think you're beginning to see, I hope you're beginning to see how this technique or method works. Now on some of these illustrations, let me pull up this finished one again. I believe, oh yeah, if you look really carefully on some of the highlights, like his straw hat and the back of his shirt, I actually finished, I haven't mentioned this yet, I say I finished with pastel, but I actually finished with gouache, white gouache, and I will do that on this if I feel the need. First, however, the job at hand is, let's throw my pencils on the floor. No, that was not the job at hand. I need some blue and gray pencils. Forgive me, I'm going to stand up here and just... I mentioned also earlier that part of the reason I have chosen this particular technique is because I want the illustration to have an overall brownish and muted cast to it. I don't want it with bright, intense colors. That just wouldn't be appropriate for in my opinion, for the subject matter and the period of history. Now I'm picking up some greens. So there'll be a few touches of perhaps red and yellow and so forth, but there won't be a great preponderance of that. That would not be appropriate. So I think I've got oh, that's a nice flesh tone. I'll keep that one out. Looking for some also flesh tones for the black men. Maybe. All right. So I have separated out several batches of color now. Maybe I don't have to do so much searching. Here's my collection of blues. And wouldn't you know it, all those blues, and I don't have one that is the right color for the Major's suit coat. Wait. Oh, there we go. I spoke too soon. There we go. I wasn't sure if I was going to use a blender or not, but you know what? Looks like I am. So if I haven't made it clear before now, let me just, I've mentioned CF or Chris Payne many times during this broadcast. I want you to understand that what I'm doing now is completely my doing. He does not use any pastel pencil at all. I'm sure he despises the use of pastel pencils. I spit on you. I bury you. You know, stuff like that. Also, I suppose I should mention one other thing about this, the technique that I have adopted for this particular job. I mentioned that it's brown because I want it to feel like it's historical, old, right? It's also, I guess this goes without saying, but until now, but now I'm going to say it, that it's also a very illustrative technique. That is to say, there's no confusion. There's nobody that would think that it looks realistic or that it looks, again, looking at the finished one. Nobody would confuse this or consider this anything but an illustration. So that's what I mean. It's not at all photographic, which again, to me, that just seemed appropriate for the subject matter. Well, I'm not sure that I want to do this, but I'm going to give the major a slightly green, yeah, that's okay, slightly green vest. It already was slightly green, but I had to decide whether I want to continue with that or not. I did, and I think it's okay. Ooh, some of these pastel pencils have gone bad. They've gone hard and waxy. I was trying to do a little brass button, so I'm not sure that was a good idea anyway, so I'll just leave it at that. I'm having a very unusual problem this evening. I mentioned earlier that I spent a good part of the day today repairing and refinishing. You know what? His legs still don't look right, and the crotch is too low. That's what's going on. I knew there was something going on here. Hey, Major, hike your drawers there. Anyways, and I was doing all this outside in the driveway. Unbeknownst to me, it was 99 degrees or 100 degrees outside today. So my eyes are, I've been drinking like crazy ever since, but I'm still dry, dehydrated, my eyes are dry. There. And don't you feel bad for me? Oh boy, hey, some people are saying things. Let's see what's going on. Nope, not too much. Let's go to this guy right here. So he's actually the most animated one of the group. He's oh, that's not a pastel pencil at all. That was a colored pencil. The problem with that is if you use colored pencil, then you lose all tooth. You can't do any more, pastel on top of colored pencil. It doesn't work at all. So, in fact, if you've done any colored pencil, you know that one of the hazards of that medium is when you lose tooth. It's a waxy, glossy substance, so you can't just pile more and more and more and more on top of each other. That's the problem. That's one of the challenges with colored pencil, and it's also one of the challenges with pastels. You only have so much tooth, and when it's gone, then you have to do something really tricky. I can get a tooth in this guy's smile. Nope, that was a mistake. They call him Bucky. Let's do this man. So far, this is my favorite figure, is this one right here. I talked earlier when I think it was Ade had asked me about recommendations for a young artist, and I said, learn how to draw faces and figures. Again, I wish again, I don't want to make it sound like I'm living with deep regret. That is not the case. But, yeah, if I were giving advice, skip right past landscape, skip animal portraits. Now, you have to work really hard. And, you know, if the Lord didn't put it in you, it's not going to come out. So there's also a measure of, you know, humility. Figuring out, do you have the chops to pursue a career in portraiture and figurative? You know, I try in my broadcast, I make certainly try to avoid making myself appear anything, you know, any better than I am. I don't want to pretend to convey the notion that I'm better. So I think I do that most of the time. So in a way, you could say, well, this is, I'm pointing at this illustration, you know, this is how good I am. That guy's head's too big. Doggone it. I'm glad I caught it now, though, eh? This is how good I am, and this is how good I ain't. I've done a fair amount, like I said earlier, about taking the Andrew Loomis book and drawing every drawing in it, and you could say, well, have you done that? No, I have not. Would I like to? Yes. Do I have time to do that in between making money with commissions? No, I don't. That's why that's the kind of thing that you can do when you're a student, when you're young. Hopefully, maybe you don't have to pay all your own bills, you know. Then you can do things like draw every drawing in the Andrew Loomis book. I have drawn every drawing in one of the George Bridgman books. He's another one. So there are three, by the way, and if you have watched me at all, you already know this. In my opinion, the three greats when it comes to drawing the human figure and the human face. The three greats are George Bridgman, Andrew Loomis, and Jack Ham. They are all quite different. That's part of the reason why they make such a good trio. You learn something different from each of them. Andrew Loomis is the best drawer. They're all good drawers, but I mean, it's just hard to beat Andrew Loomis, period. They're all good. His drawings are the best. George Bridgman taught at the Art Student League of New York in the 20s. That is 100 years ago. And his genius is taking all the aspects of the human figure and sort of making them overly linear, overly geometric, and then they're easier to see and to remember. So that's George Bridgman. And you can learn so much just by drawing. Jack Ham, who worked in the 60s, he's the most clever of the three. He's the one who uses the most mnemonic devices, little tricks for remembering, because there's a lot to remember when it comes to anatomy. And so Jack Ham, 2 M's, H-A-M-M. I would show you his book if my hands were free, but they're not, so never mind. So again, I'm just sort of pointing. I like this figure pretty well. And again, there's many different mediums and styles of illustration. Now it may be, I don't think I normally do this, but if I want to, if I decide to, I can go back downstairs and spray this for a second time with the lacquer mat. It's like a heavy-duty workable fixative. I don't know that I'll do that. We'll wait and see. And if you do that, of course, pretty much anytime you spray any kind of fixative on pastel, it will disappear. Not completely, but you will definitely lose. I don't want to give you the impression that you can spray a fixative on top of this without impacting it. It will definitely be impacted, but sometimes it's worth it. Anyway, I hope I don't have to do that, because I would. Part of learning to draw the human figure, of course, is also learning how to draw clothing. My biggest challenge is I'm terrible at paying attention to clothing styles. Now that doesn't matter here because it's a historical document, if you will. But yeah, you have to know how do folds, different kinds of fabric and so on and so forth. Just again, this all part of the business, as you certainly know. Not sure I've done a great job on that man's coat. Somebody saw it say something? Nope. Nope. Hello, gang. Let me turn off my chat because I think I might be missing some of your chats. Nope. Doing. All right. I think you guys have seen enough. Hey, well, hang on. I'll do. As soon as I say that, that's just me, isn't it? All over. Let's do a little bit of the background just so you can see how I handle that. This is a piece of regular pastel, not a pastel pencil, because it's a nice sky blue. And I want these windows to glow a little bit. How about that? And then in combination with the glowing, in contrast, if you will, to the glow, I'm going to come back and reintroduce some hard edge outline. Again, just to be, I want a uniform technique, a uniform feeling throughout the illustration. Yeah, that's too yellow. I haven't quite decided yet which direction, if I want these. I will probably, honestly, I will probably tweak the edge of this illustration in Photoshop. And make it play around with how it fades out at all around the edges. Probably haven't quite decided that yet. Deciding that right now as I do it, aren't I? Somewhat. Let me sit back and take a look at this. It's getting a little bit tight. So I'm actually introducing some plain old-fashioned hatching. My edges are too precise, so glad I took a little break there. I need to be careful not to get too tight. Don't let my pencil drag along the paper for any length. Let's make my strokes a little bit choppier and less regular. I'm thinking at the moment. Cracks in the wall, I guess. Actually, they're just more abstract. Carolina. Carolina Fiber Company. That was the name of the company in 1900, 1910, whatever. I want it to be barely readable, don't want to knock anybody's eyes out. I just want it to be barely legible. You know what I'll probably do? I'll probably make this guy's head smaller in Photoshop. I hate to admit that, but that's probably what I'm going to do. It'll just be so much easier than messing around with it. And it's almost just his hair is too big. Maybe his shoulder doesn't go up quite far enough. So I can make that adjustment now. Again, I'm focusing quite a bit right now on just more feathery lines. It was just getting a little bit too tight, stiff. But I think I can quit with a clear conscience here. I've fulfilled my self-imposed obligation to show you guys how I do it. So there you go. I think I've shown you enough, and I appreciate again your company. He says, as he keeps drawing. Now, I've been known to say things like that and then keep going for another 30 minutes. Like the old Baptist preacher. And finally, and he goes on for another 25 minutes. Let me compare this again to this. Yeah, see, there we go. There's more light feathery stuff here that I like. It's not quite being reflected in this, so I'll again try to make that adjustment. Etc. Fair enough? Thanks for watching. I am really going to sign off now, okay? I certainly hope to broadcast. I hope to finish 2 paintings tomorrow, or not finish them both, but work on 2 paintings and nearly finish them. All right? If I haven't finished this, I'll do that too.